Okay. Good morning to old friends and some new people who are joining. Summer in Wisconsin, and there may be some other people who I don't know. So we're going to begin again another 8 weeks of class, and then we'll have a 1 week break and then another 8 weeks before Christmas. And so Snehi, why don't you, if you wanted to either, I'm not sure if you want to do first the mandala or if you want to do the prayers first. Let's begin that.
Okay, I will share screen now. And everyone, please bear with me. I'm reciting the prayers today, and I'll recite them in English to the best of my ability. So we will recite 3 times. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrators. And then we'll do the short mandala offering, also in English. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kami Yataya. And because this is the first class of the module, we will recite the foundation of all good qualities. And I remember from earlier session, Venerable George would like just a short pause so we can reflect on the subject matter of the verse.
Yeah.
So we'll begin. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect Guru. Correctly following the Guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. When I have discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful, please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, results of black and white karma follow. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcomings of samsaric perfections, there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. They are the door to all suffering, and they cannot be trusted. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought, with great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows the root of the teachings my essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother transmigratory beings. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta without familiarizing myself with the 3 types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vow of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. By my having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. When I have become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles of Vajrayana. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 attainments is keeping my vows and samayas purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then, when I have realized exactly the vital points of the 2 stages, the essence of the tantric sets, and am enjoying the yoga 4 sessions with effort without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Thus, may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who correctly accomplish it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, never separated from perfect gurus, may I enjoy the magnificent dharma, and by completing the qualities of the sages of the grounds and path, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, that prayer was composed by Lama Tsongkhapa himself, I think at Reading, which is a location north of Lhasa. I explained this before, but just to remind you, a very holy place. So it has a lot of great qualities. So good to see you again. I think probably a couple people were missing, either they're in transit. Paul and Jennifer, maybe. Oh no, Jennifer's there. There she is. So one of our classmates, Doris Tatri, very kindly has created a YouTube channel with 296 of my talks over the years at various places. And Snehi is going to put in the chat a link in case you're interested. You can copy it. And also a link eventually to a text that one of my friends wrote on objectless compassion, which is one of the topics that we're going to be getting into, the 3 types of compassion: compassion observing mere sentient beings, compassion observing phenomena, and compassion observing the non-observable, or you could call it objectless compassion, like the mantra of Lama Tsongkhapa, Migme Sewe, Ter Chen Chen Rezi. So you can copy that, you can download that text, and if you like to, you can read it. It's not mandatory, but it might give you a lot of insight into the questions, the subtlety of the questions that we're going to be talking about. So, having done the prayers at the beginning, I won't give a meditation right now, but just remind you the reason that we're studying this particular text, the Lama Tsongkhapa, is to try to better understand in depth the topic of emptiness, how to realize emptiness. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche has said many times, to really understand and to be able to realize emptiness, you really have to have some insight into the great texts that were written by Nagarjuna, by Arya by Buddhapalita, especially the text by Chandrakirti, the entry into the middle way or supplement to the middle way, which Lama Tsongkhapa's text, Illumination of the Intent, is a commentary to. Lama Tsongkhapa comments on the root verses, although they're not always enumerated in his text in Tibetan. I think Thupten Jinpa has put most of the verses in. And he's also commented on Chandrakirti's auto-commentary, that is his own commentary to the verses. So we call it the Madhyamaka Vatara Karikas. Karika means verses, and the Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham. Bhasham means self-commentary, auto-commentary. So there were other commentaries to Chandrakirti's verses and to his commentary. The only one in Sanskrit that we know of was written by an Indian man named Pandit, Buddhist Pandit, called Jayananda, who we refer to again and again. Lama Tsongkhapa mentions, because he's closely reading Jayananda's commentary. Jayananda had come to Tibet, and I'm not sure if he composed his commentary in Tibet or if he had composed it earlier and just oversaw the translation into Tibetan. But that's the only other Sanskrit commentary that we have besides Chandrakirti's own commentary. Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is what we're studying, the Illumination of the Intent, or Gompa Rabsal. So I'm going to begin just with maybe a couple of paragraphs before we left off last time. And hi, Paul. I just noticed you there. And if I start mentioning this, I wonder if someone can give the page number of the text that says, owing to what causes and conditions do we revolve? Because I have a digital copy which changes the pagination. Owing to what causes and conditions do we revolve? It is through karma and the afflictions. When we talk about
page 49, George.
Thank you, Paul. Page 49. So this is talking about why do we revolve in cyclic existence? And we know from the Four Noble Truths, the second truth, the origination of suffering, has two aspects, karma and klesha. Here he translates karma and the afflictions. Affliction is a way we can translate klesha. Owing to demeritorious karma and its related afflictions, we revolve in the lower realms, and due to meritorious and unwavering karma, or immovable karma, we revolve in the higher realms. Remember, we talked about meritorious karma is what you create to be born as a human or as a deva of the desire realm, or as of those generally. Sometimes we say asuras, but as we'll see in a minute, you've heard of the asura realm, the anti-god realm. Usually we put them in the upper realms, but we'll see in a minute, in some enumerations, the Buddha talked about them as bad migration, maybe because they're so angry and jealous and everything like that. So immovable karma is a karma that we create to be born in the form and formless absorptions. They're immovable because that karma that you create can't ripen anywhere else in any other realm. So you remember that from last time we were talking about that. We enter into the first effortlessly, that is taking rebirth in the lower realms, like rolling a boulder down a hill. Without needing to strive to take birth there. It is harder to be born in the latter, the upper realms, since their causes require cultivation with great effort. This is, as mentioned in the basis of discipline, one of the basics texts in the Vinaya. We call it Vinaya. I can't read my own writing here. Shvatu, where the Buddha says that the number of those who migrate from the higher and lower realms on their way to the lower realms are like the number of particles of dust that exist on this great earth, while those migrating from these two realms on their way to the higher realms are like the numbers of dust particles collected between the tips of the fingers. Remember, that's where we finished last time. So I wanted to mention in that regard, where that comes from is from a sutra you can find in the Pali Canon, the Nakasika Sutta, as they say, instead of saying sutra, they say sutta, which talks about dust under the nail. And I'll quote a little bit from that, because sometimes you may wonder where that comes from. Maybe you've heard that before also in the Lan Rim. Does anyone know in the Lan Rim where that comes up? Shankar, you must know, no? When we talk about the perfect, go on.
I don't remember exactly where it comes up. No.
Oh, in the
Perfect human rebirth, the perfect
Yeah.
human rebirth section.
Yeah. So we talk about how difficult it is in terms of the causes. You need to create morality and charity and pure prayer to be born in the upper realms. We talk about it in terms of nature. You know, if you just look in the world, there are far more beings as animals. You know, even insects are part of the animal realm than humans, and it is said that the number of beings in the hungry ghost realm, the Preta realm, is greater than the animal realm, and the number of beings in hell, the hell realms, are much greater. And then by means of examples, one of the examples is the blind turtle that comes up, you know, once every 100 years, and if fortuitous enough to place its head through a golden yoke floating on the surface of the ocean, that's equivalent, an example of how rare it is to find a perfect human rebirth. Another example the Buddha gave in the Nakasika Sutta. So he says, staying at Savati, which we would say in, maybe you said Shravasti, like Shravasti abbot. Then the Blessed One, picking up a little dust with the tip of his fingernail, said to the monks, "What do you think, monks? Which is greater, the little bit of dust I have picked up with the tip of my fingernail, or the dust of the great earth?" And the monks replied, "The great earth is far greater, Lord. The little bit of dust that the Blessed One has picked up with the tip of his fingernail is next to nothing. It doesn't even count." This is, I'm sure it could be translated different ways. This is from a Pali translation. It doesn't even count. It's no comparison. It's not even a fraction. This little bit of dust the Blessed One has picked up with the tip of his fingernail when compared with the great earth. So the Buddha says, in the same way, monks, few are the beings reborn among the human beings. Far more are those reborn elsewhere. So he's talking about difference between human and elsewhere, right? Thus you should train yourselves. We will live heedfully. That is how you should train yourself. Again, the Buddha said, those who have expired from the four miserable worlds, usually we talk about the three lower realms, right? In some enumerations, they are, usually we say the lower realms are Durgati or Ngensong, the gone evil. In some enumerations, there's the animal, ghost, hell, and the asuras. So that's what he's talking about here. He's mentioning 4 miserable worlds. Again, those who have expired from the 4 miserable worlds and are reborn in the abodes of men and devas are few, even as the grains of dust in my fingernail. And those who were repeatedly reborn in the 4 miserable worlds are innumerable, even as the grains of dust of this great earth. So I thought that was kind of just worth mentioning. When you study the Lan Rim, you may have, many different kinds of examples there. All of them can be found in the sutras. Okay, so that's where we finished last time. So now just continuing. Thus, we should reflect on the following. During the period of the activity of any of the 3 afflictions, now we were talking about the 12 links here, right? When we talk about the 12 links, of the 12 links, 3 of them are klesha, are afflictions, namely ignorance, craving, and grasping, or as he puts here, appropriation. So the first link is ignorance. Then when you get up to the middle of the group, you have craving, grasping, and becoming. Craving and grasping, or craving and appropriation, are also mental afflictions that cause karma, either cause karma or cause karma to ripen. So ignorance is the first link that creates the karma. And at the time of death, the mind of craving and grasping, or even not only at the time of death, but especially more powerful than craving and grasping, can cause the karmic seeds that have been implanted due to ignorance, the first link, to become more powerful. And at the time of death, craving and grasping can cause that karmic seed that is being ripened in particular to become the throwing karma. So when we talk about craving, grasping, and becoming is not a klesha. That link means the karmic seed that has been nurtured by craving and grasping to the point where it is ready to impel you into your next rebirth. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, thus we should reflect on the following. During the period of the activity of any of the 3 afflictions, ignorance, craving, and appropriation, of a single cycle of dependent origination, you talk about 12, one after the other. The 2 other afflicted factors, karma and birth or rebirth, pertaining to a different cycle of dependent origination, can come to operate. And so the continuity never ceases. If you've studied the 12 links, you're probably familiar with this. And this is one of the reasons that supposedly the Pratika Buddhas, the solitary realizers, take the 12 links as their particular avenue of investigating cyclic existence. Usually the Shravakas take the 4 noble truths, but the 12 links give more detail, sort of a deeper insight into how we, even right now, we're creating links for future 12 links that we will experience in the future. One year when I was doing a Manjushri retreat at Kopan, Lama Yeshe said, especially you should meditate on the 12 links. It gives a deeper insight into cyclic existence, into how we cyclic existence operates, how samsara operates. And so the continuity never ceases. So as long as you haven't cut the 12 links, even during one cycle of 12 links, you're creating causes, ignorance, and so forth, to have more, 12 links in the future. Furthermore, we are tormented by the 3 classes of suffering on a daily basis, not just once, but constantly, like endless ripples of water. Okay, so we, right now, you may not feel so bad. You might think, I don't have any great suffering. If you don't have, if you have a headache or if you have some pain in your arm or your body or something like that, you may say that, or if you have a headache, you may say you're experiencing suffering. But even when we're experiencing pleasure, we are experiencing one of the three classes of suffering. We talk about suffering of suffering, which is obvious suffering, changeable suffering, which is all of the pleasurable feelings that we experience. They're actually the nature of suffering, right? And the compounded, pervasive suffering, which we don't even notice. Just having a body and a mind that are still under the influence of karma and afflictions, karma and klesha, we're set up. We're ready to experience suffering at any moment. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa says, if someone experiences no effect whatsoever in his or her mind when they reflect initially on the way they wander in the cycle of existence and samsara, there is no way that such a person would experience on the beginner's stage an unbearable concern for others when contemplating their suffering. So what's the context here? We're talking about great compassion. Great compassion is taking concern, having empathy for others who are experiencing suffering and wishing them to be free of that suffering, and even taking the responsibility to eliminate that suffering, right? From the Mahayana point of view, we talk about great compassion. So how could you have great compassion for others, like say the rich and famous, who are wealthy and experiencing all sorts of pleasures, or those who are just in repose, not necessarily, maybe others who are like me, living in a cabin, not having any great pleasures, but, sort of neutral feelings. One has to understand, first of all, in one's own experience, the shortcomings of cycling and of circling and cyclic existence. That's why in the Lan Rim, when we talk about the three stages, the person of initial scope, intermediate scope, and great scope, we have to precede the meditation of the person of great scope with a person of intermediate scope, and even that has to be preceded by meditations that are conducive for the person of initial scope. So what this means here is that we have to first try to develop renunciation ourself and experience the nature of the unsatisfactory nature of cyclic existence, and unsatisfactory nature of samsara in our own experience. Otherwise, how can you have compassion for others who are experiencing these things? Therefore, just as explained in the commentary on the 400 stanzas, who wrote that commentary? Anyone know?
Arya Deva.
Who?
Arya Deva.
Arya Deva wrote the 400 stanzas, but the commentary Lama Tsongkhapa is referring to here was
probably Chandrakirti's commentary.
Yeah, probably referring to Chandrakirti's commentary. Lama Tsongkhapa and his disciples also wrote commentaries on that commentary. So just as explained in the commentary on the 400 stanzas, 400 stanzas was composed by Arya Deva. The commentary that Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about is that of Chandrakirti. One must first contemplate suffering in relation to one's own self. Sort of as a prelude. So if you're having trouble commiserating with the suffering of others, it's sort of self-analysis, self-diagnosis. Well, maybe I don't have the causes. I don't yet, in my own experience, appreciate the deficiencies of, being in samsara, of having these three kinds of suffering. So you have to investigate that. Even pleasurable feelings, at the very moment you're experiencing them, not only will they eventually turn into suffering, but at the very moment that you're experiencing them, they are the nature of suffering, right? You might say, well, how is that? The more, the example I've often given, the more stracciatella ice gelato or, chocolate chip ice cream I eat, at first, one suffering is going down, so you experience it as some kind of pleasure. But the more you eat, as I experience quite often, upset stomach comes, acid stomach, you don't even want to see ice cream any longer. So at the very moment that you're experiencing pleasurable feelings, contaminated pleasurable feelings, because there are uncontaminated pleasurable feelings that the bodhisattvas and even the Hinayana arhats can experience, which are not of that nature. Then one should contemplate, then once you've analyzed yourself, you've developed renunciation, you should contemplate in relation to other sentient beings. Make sense? Janice, what do you think? Janice P. If you press the space bar, there you go.
Yeah, I know. I'm on my tablet today. There was just a complete meltdown on my laptop, so I'm a little befuddled. So could you please repeat the question?
I was just wondering what you thought. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Especially the ice cream example.
So, yeah, that's a good example. So as a prelude, it's the same thing with many of the meditations that we do. If we have trouble actualizing some meditation in the stages of the path, we should look what the previous stages were that we may not have actualized and experienced yet. That can give us an insight of what to meditate on in order to be successful in some more ambitious meditation. So the text continues. We might ask, will merely having, okay, so already we know that part. So we might ask, will merely having contemplated how other sentient beings are tormented by suffering and its origin in the cycle of existence, in samsara, induce great compassion? So, first of all, you have to have an experience of your own suffering. But then when you think about others, you might think, well, this compassion should arise then. But unless you have a sense of closeness to them, affection for them, you won't necessarily have compassion for them. In fact, you might feel very happy that they're experiencing suffering, right? You can see that in the present political scene, if someone experiences some kind of, invasion by the law or something like that, the followers, if you don't have any affection for that person, you might feel, yeah, we got him. Maybe not you. We might ask, will merely having contemplated how other sentient beings are tormented by suffering and its origin in samsara induce great compassion? Or does it require some additional complementary factor? So this is the same thing. Not only to develop compassion, not only do you need to understand your own suffering, but the fact is, when you see an enemy suffering, far from any unbearable feeling, a sense of joy may even arise in its place. Make sense? Similarly, when we encounter the suffering of someone who has neither benefited nor harmed us, when we talk about the three kinds of individuals, friends, enemies, and strangers, sort of like the stranger, doesn't mean that they're unknown to you. They can be unknown to you, but people that haven't impacted you one way or the other. They're not friend or enemy. Similarly, when we encounter the suffering of someone who has neither benefited nor harmed us, most of the time we are unmoved by their plight, right? You read an article about someone. If you have a kind heart, you may feel some empathy, some compassion for them. Otherwise, it maybe doesn't move your mind. Before I go further, Mary Ellen, I'm sorry, I think you had your hand up. You had your icon up for a question.
I did before, and then I hit it accidentally trying to get back to speaker view. But so in the Lam Rim, it always talks about when you're reading on the great scope, it always talks about the practices in common with the lower scope and the practices in common with the middle scope. Is that what they're meaning? You do the practices in common with those, then you generate affectionate feelings, then you generate love, then you generate.
Yes, that's one of the takeaways from that. So the person of initial scope is mainly aiming, there are practices that can help you to develop the desire to find a better rebirth in the future. The person of intermediate scope realizes that even having a better life in the future as a human or God, that will also end. You need to get out of samsara. You need to develop, the attitude of renunciation. Both of them are, they're going to impact your meditation of the person of higher scope. So it's not as though you study the Lan Rim and you think, oh, that's for the beginners, the person of beginning scope or intermediate scope. That will have an impact on the success of your meditation on the person of higher scope. So similarly, when we encounter the suffering of someone who has neither benefited nor harmed us, in other words, a stranger or the intermediate kind of person, most of the time we are unmoved by their plight. This happens because we lack, on our part, a sense of holding them dear. Generally, this word, holding them dear, chezin. Che means dear. Zin means holding. So we call Rang Chen Zin Gilo. Rang means self. So cherishing oneself as dear, that's the usual obstacle. We hold ourself as most precious and important. And because of that, if our mind is not cultivated to take into consideration others, even in a family, there's some people who are very selfish. One of the kids or members, or maybe ourselves, when we were kids, it didn't matter that mom and dad had to work to get, put food on the table or to pay for our education or to buy us enjoyments. Everything was revolving around ourselves. Most people will have a certain affection for those that are close to them, their parents, their brothers and sisters, or their friends. Maybe they don't like their brothers and sisters or their parents, but they'll have someone that they like, right? So this happens because we lack, on our part, a sense of holding them dear. We hold our friends dear, or if we're, a responsible, normal kind of person, we hold our parents dear. We cherish them. We hold our brothers and sisters, our aunts and uncles, and so forth. But there's a certain group of people that we sense have benefited us, and therefore we work for their benefit. That's what nationalism is, also, right? We have a certain kind of, even though there are people in other places that are more or less strangers, because they share the same kind of identity of this being an American or a German or a Russian or whatever. we work for their benefit. We go to war. We even die in certain cases for them. This happens because we lack on our part a sense of holding them dear. In contrast, when we see the suffering of those we love, our friends and family, here he says close kin, we find this unbearable. If you don't like your brothers and sisters, if you don't like your relatives, you don't find their plight unbearable, you might actually, think Uncle Charlie got what's coming to him. But this is talking about those we love, those who we have affection for. We find this unbearable. We find their suffering unbearable. In fact, the more profoundly we hold someone dear, it seems the more intense the feeling of unbearableness. So this is the origin in the Mahayana mind training. When we talk about seeing the shortcomings of cherishing oneself and seeing the benefits of cherishing others. The benefit, in this context, one of the benefits of cherishing others is that we can then develop compassion for them, which is the cornerstone of developing bodhicitta. When we talked about the three practices, remember, great compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta. So if we have this ambition, not only to escape from cyclic existence for ourselves, but to become a Buddha, to be able to work for other sentient beings, we have to recognize the defects of cherishing ourself, selfishness, only thinking of ourselves, and begin to exchange that with an attitude that considers other people's welfare, their happiness, or their suffering as, the elimination of their suffering as more important than our own. Geshe Hobden, I can't remember his first name, who was one of Lama Yeshe's kind of contemporaries, was very well regarded in Dharamsala and at the monasteries as someone who was really putting the teachings into practice. In his own personal practice, he always talked about when he would evaluate what to do, he would always evaluate what would be more beneficial for others, for the majority, rather than just for himself. So the text continues, thus the essential point is how we need to generate a sense of endearment toward other sentient beings, a deep regard for them, cherishing them in our heart, cherishing them from our heart, right? How are we doing? Making sense, right? No problem. Now, with respect to the method for generating this sense of endearment or closeness, or affection for others, there seem to be two approaches among the learned masters. See what Jeffrey says here. Jeffrey doesn't say there seem to be. He says, among the kings of scholars, there are two systems concerning the means for generating the sense of pleasantness, in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation. I'm not sure. I'm sure in other universes and other world systems, there are even other methods to develop closeness, a sense of kindness for others. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when teaching the Catholics at one point, came out as a book. I can't remember the name of the title of the book. He was teaching the Gospels at the request of the abbot of a monastery near London. And he said, from the Christian point of view, the idea that we are all the children of God, we are all God's creation, he thought that made sense from a Buddhist point of view of being effective to develop a sense of closeness or dearness of others. You know, like they're your brothers and sisters. They're created by your Father, God. So even though Buddhists do not ascribe to the fact that there is a creator God who created all of us in his image, or if you want to be more modern, in her image, still from a Buddhist perspective, one can understand how following that line of reasoning, one could develop affection for others in theory, right? So there seem to be two approaches among the learned masters, Lama Tsongkhapa says. The first is, as explained by Chandrakirti in his commentary on the 400 stanzas. So this is, now he mentions Chandrakirti here. That means the 400 stanzas that was written by Arya Deva. Chandrakirti later wrote a commentary on that. He speaks of how once one has contemplated that all sentient beings have been one's kin, one's relatives, in particular have been one's mother, having been one's parents, for instance, since beginningless time. You all are familiar with this, right? When we talk about the 7-point method to generate bodhicitta, the 7 causes and effect. First one is recognizing that all sentient beings have been your mother. The second is remembering their kindness. Third is developing a determination to repay that kindness. Amongst the Lamrim meditations or realizations, that is said to be one of the 2 most difficult realizations to make. Have you heard that before? David, have you heard? You don't know what the other one is. Diana, have you studied Lamrim recently? Diana Weddington? When we talk about the two most difficult realizations of the Lamrim, one of them is to recognize that all sentient beings have been one's mother. Do you know what the other one is?
I don't off the top of my head.
The other one is said to be, oh, anyone know? Is there anyone? Nadine, what's it?
Seeing the guru as Buddha.
Yeah, those 2 are said to be the 2 most difficult realizations. It makes sense to we don't have clairvoyance. We don't see that every sentient being has been our mother. So it requires a great deal of investigation to develop that kind of understanding. So he speaks of how once one has contemplated that all sentient beings have been one's kin, having been one's parents, for instance, since beginningless time, one will have the forbearance, the fortitude, the patience to plunge into cyclic existence to help free them. And that note, 89, he's quoting this, the commentary by Chandrakirti. Let me get back to that. Oops, how can I get back to that? Oh. Sorry. On the digital, on my computer, there's usually a little thing that I could go back to the place where I just left. But here, it's not quite, on the tablet, it's not quite as easy. Hold on. There we go. have to remember not to go to the notes on this tablet because I can't get back to the place I want to be easily. Oh. Okay. Okay. Now, with respect to the method for generating this sense of endearment, there seem to be two approaches among the learned masters. The first is as explained by Chandrakirti in his commentary in the 400 stanzas, where he speaks of how once one has contemplated that all sentient beings have been one's kin, having been one's parents, for instance, since beginningless time, one will have the forbearance to plunge into cyclic existence to help free them. This is also the method taught by the great being Chandragoman, as well as the Pandits, the learned Kamalashila. Do you know who Chandragoman was? Anyone? Someone nod their head. Paul, who is Chandragoman?
Chandragoman, well, he was a lay practitioner, lay tantric practitioner from Sri Lanka, if I remember correctly, who propagated the Manjushri Nama Samgiti. He may have been other things as well.
Right. Chandragoman, I think, was the one who was a contemporary of Chandrakirti, and they had some sort of interactions, some debates, and I think Chandragoman, was it Chandragoman? Was it with Chandrakirti or someone else? Anyway, Chandragoman wanted to show that rebirth existed. And so he said that in his next life, when he was born, they would find a pearl in his mouth. I can't remember all the details of the story. So Chandragoman, as well as Kamalashila. Kamalashila came much later. Kamalashila actually was Indian also, but visited Tibet at the request of the Tibetan kings. He was Padmasambhava Guru Rinpoche had said that in the future, when there would be problems in Tibet, they should invite his disciple Shantarakshita and Kamalashila. So Kamalashila is the author who wrote the stages of meditation, the Gomrim, the Bhavana Kraman. There are, I think, three different books that he wrote. So both of them taught this method of developing bodhicitta through developing affection for sentient beings by remembering their closeness to them over numberless lives in the past. Remember the seven methods of cause and effect. So that's one method. The other method, and we've mentioned this in other teachings also, is the second approach is the tradition of glorious Shantideva. This I have explained elsewhere, so please understand it from there. That means the meditation on equalizing and exchanging self and others. So that's found in other texts too, not just Shantideva. Nagarjuna also mentions that until one can equalize and exchange oneself with others, there's no way to develop the bodhisattva path. What that meditation is doing, and from your Lan Rim teachings, is to center on the defects of the self-cherishing thought, the benefits of cherishing others, having realized that you are exactly the same as them, that in a certain respect, as you are, this is especially more effective for the individual of higher intellect, of higher faculties, sharp faculties. The method of 7 methods of cause and effect, remembering that all sentient beings have been your mother and so forth, especially the method for those of lesser faculty, we call followers of faith, and the method of equalizing and exchanging self and others, especially more powerful for those who are called followers of reasoning, who have sharper faculties, who can understand emptiness, who can understand that there is no self, myself to cherish, no inherently existent self, the way that it appears to the mind. And having understood that, one can understand that it's possible to set your goal, not just for the happiness of oneself, but for the welfare and happiness of all sentient beings. So he says, I've explained that elsewhere. That means in the Lanrim Chemo, the great stages of the path. And so if you look at that note, I won't press that button now because it's hard to get back to this page. You'll see, or if you look at that note in the text 91, it'll tell you where to look in the Lanrim Chemo, I think. Paul,
volume 2, pages 51 through 60 of the English translation.
Right. So the one by, was it Joshua Cutler and so forth. So the text continues, those who strive in training in great compassion on the basis of 2 factors, deeply caring for sentient beings in one's heart and contemplating the manner in which they are tormented within cyclic existence, have made Chandrakirti's unique choice of compassion as the object of salutation serve its purpose. Remember what he's talking about at the beginning of the text, Chandrakirti's text, he pays homage to great compassion rather than the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or other things. And so these 2 factors that we just talked about, recognizing the suffering of sentient beings and feeling close to them, deeply caring for sentient beings from one's heart, that means the sense of cherishing them, and contemplating the manner in which they are tormented within cyclic existence, having understood from the person of initial scope and intermediate scope, the suffering of samsara, all of, how samsara is like an endless cycle of torment. I often think, living here alone in my cabin day after day, just thinking, I have to wash the dishes again and again, I have to wash the clothes again and again, have to shave again and again, have to wash again and again. These are superficial remembrances of the suffering of cyclic existence. It's endless. Is if you stay in cyclic existence, you'll have to wash the dishes forever. You'll have to shave forever, or if you don't shave, you'll have to, do something forever. So those who strive in training in compassion on the basis of these 2 factors, recognizing the suffering nature of cyclic existence and developing affection for sentient beings, have made Chandrakirti's unique choice of compassion as the object of salutation serve its purpose. The explanation of one who fails to do this, yet harbors the pretension of being versed in this text, Chandrakirti's text, will resemble the recitation of a parrot, just like the prattling of a parrot. It's just you hear people talking about, on TV and the various, what do they call it? The religious programs and so forth in the United States, at least, it's almost as though they don't actually take the words to heart. When we talk about the Christians who are talking about, killing other people and so forth and so on. One should understand this point in other contexts of the text as well, as to how this specific form of compassion constitutes compassion that takes sentient beings as its object. That will be explained later. So we talk about three kinds of compassion here. And so let me just check here. In the chat, there should be a link to this text that I suggested to you, Objectless Compassion and the Limits of Empiricism, by this very dear friend and scholar, Jeremy Mannheim. You can download that and read that. So first now, next topic, paying homage to compassion that takes phenomenal reality and takes no reference as its object. Generally, Thupten Jinpa tends to make things a little bit poetic sounding. We would say, generally, we would say compassion that compassion observing phenomena, chula mikbe ningje, phenomena observing phenomena. Here he calls it phenomenal reality, and compassion that takes no reference as its object. What that means is mamikbe. Let's say. Mamikbala mikbe ningje. So that what that means is compassion which observes that which is in essence unobservable, true existence. That means a compassion that has realized, has within its continuum the realization of emptiness. So the root verse that we're talking about here is, beings are like reflections of the moon in rippling water, seeing them as fleeting and as devoid of intrinsic nature. And then the verse continues on. So the Lama Tsongkhapa elucidates. He says, to elucidate compassion that takes phenomenal reality or takes phenomena as its object, that observes phenomena. What does that mean? And also compassion that takes no reference as its object. By means of their distinct objects, the two lines beginning with the word beings is presented here. So the first word of that is beings, right? Reading these lines as, I will bow to the one who, seeing beings to be subject to moment by moment disintegration, as fleeting like the reflections of the moon in rippling water, stirred by wind, becomes compassionate toward them, is to pay homage to compassion that takes phenomenal reality as its object. So what Lama Tsongkhapa is doing here is he's putting together the Chandrakirti's root verses, the Karakas, this one, beings are like reflections of the moon in rippling water, seeing them as fleeting and as devoid of intrinsic nature. He's putting that together with Chandrakirti's commentary and adding his own commentary to that. So we're trying to unravel this, or to make sense of this. So similarly, to read these lines as, I will bow down to the one who sees transmigrating beings, migrators, though appearing as devoid of intrinsic nature. How does sentient beings appear? Who sees transmigrating beings, though appearing, they appear to be truly existent, as devoid of intrinsic nature, just like the reflection of moon and water, and becomes compassionate toward them, is to pay homage to compassion that takes no reference as its object. So let's go back a little bit. What we're talking about are of the three kinds of compassion, great compassion, compassion that observes mere sentient beings, compassion that observes sentient beings qualified as being impermanent, or great compassion that observes sentient beings who one has qualified or has distinguished, one recognizes they are devoid of intrinsic existence, that they are empty of inherent existence. Those are the three kinds of compassion, three kinds of great compassion that are being talked about here. We mentioned a little bit about it before, the different advantages one would have. Say, for instance, I had mentioned before that if you recognize it's the nature of sentient beings to be impermanent. You know, when they are dying, if they're experiencing suffering, your mind is not going to have sort of idiot kind of compassion that is, you know, becomes frenetic and frantic and worrying and pulling your hair that they're suffering. You know, usually when people die in funerals in Italy and Greece and so forth, they're professional mourners, right? Familiar? Karen, have you seen professional mourners in Italy?
No, just in my Italian family in the US.
Yeah.
Lifelong mourners.
Screaming and pulling their hair. You hire people to come during the funeral to express, you know, great distress and so forth. That's kind of like idiot compassion, what we would say from one's point, because they haven't recognized it was inevitable that they were going to die. You know, the great in the Lao Tzu and other, you know, in Taoism and so forth, when we talk about, I think it was Lao Tzu's wife had died, and the people came to his cabin after a long time thinking that he would be in mourning and sad and so forth. And he was drinking beer and playing drums and dancing and so forth. And this was kind of, you know, illustrative of the fact that his mind had already realized the Tao, you know, the way that everything is going to end, and there's no reason to become sort of like, have that kind of idiotic response to that. If you also realize sentient beings are empty of inherent existence, that's an even deeper kind of sobriety when things change. You know, you see it as just illusory and so forth. So this is one of the kind of, what I had mentioned before, kind of the advantages of these deeper kinds of compassion. So what that means is having realized impermanence. So that means not just a correct belief in impermanence, but having some kind of realization of that. Then, you know, within your mind stream, in close proximity to developing compassion, when you observe sentient beings, this is what's meant by qualified by being impermanent. Your mind already knows that they're impermanent. You're not realizing impermanence at that moment, because compassion is a mind that wishes sentient beings to be free of suffering, right? It's not, compassion is not a mind that is realizing impermanence, but the mind is affected by or held by the realization of impermanence as you're observing them and wishing them to be free from suffering. That is a greater kind of compassion, because you recognize that they themselves are changing and they are unaware of that. You have compassion for the fact that they are unaware of their actual nature. further, if you talk about the third kind of compassion, as you realize not only are you not affected by their suffering, with sort of idiot kind of reaction, but you realize that they themselves are oblivious of the fact that they are empty of inherent existence, that there's no inherently existent self. And as a result of that, they develop attachment and anger, they have ignorance, jealousy, pride, and all of the various kinds of suffering of cyclic existence. So you develop a deeper compassion for them because you realize the depth of their problem. It's not just suffering. It's that the cause of the suffering, the ignorance that causes them to cycle in cyclic existence, to circle in cyclic existence. Make sense? Summer, what do you think?
Oh, I'm thinking about, there's some people in my family that are struggling with things, and unfortunately, I'm not getting sucked into it. I do have this tendency to just see they just don't realize that they're holding on to these concepts so hard, Right. And if they could just they think that this object or the thing that they want to pursue is making them happy. But they don't see the opposite, that it's actually they're wanting it so badly that's causing difficulty. And I tend to get sucked into it a little bit too, the story, you're talking with them directly, but then I am sometimes able to step back and just, it's, they just are, this momentary flow is back and forth. I don't know. It just really struck me, the picture of this reflection, this rippling effect of a moon on water, and how it is. It's just, it's there. You're observing it, but it's really not tangible. So, I was struck with this idea that this grasping. It feels so real when you're doing it, but right. There is no essence. It is like just a reflection.
So in terms of this, if we recognize, the fact that they're suffering, that's only one part of the compassion, right? Mm-hmm. We have to have an affection for them also. So if we get frustrated with our friends or relatives, they're doing crazy things, or the population, whatever. If we have difficulty developing compassion for them, although we recognize their plight, that they're caught up in these ideas that are wrong, what we need to do is go back and to develop the corresponding element of having affection for them, recognizing that they have all been intimately related with us in the past. There's no one who is always an enemy or always a friend. They're changing from life to life, but they have all been kind and benefited us so many times in the past. And even when they were enemy, they benefited us in that they helped to ripen our negative karma in the human realm so that we wouldn't have to experience it later in the lower realms for much longer periods of time and so forth. Many, many kinds of ways of understanding from the Lan Rim. Ron, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Actually, you were just addressing it then about the affection and developing it and how it's entwined with the compassion.
Right. In order to develop compassion, as the text had just mentioned, just previously when we were talking, you needed to have these two factors of recognizing the suffering nature Sometimes it's quite obvious when people are having problems, but you have to go deeper than that to realize how they're suffering anywhere within cyclic existence, even when they're famous and happy and powerful and so forth. And you have to have affection for them. So these three kinds of compassion, one is great compassion. One is just observing sentient beings without having a thought, without being held by the idea that they're impermanent or that they're empty of inherent existence. That's called great compassion observing sentient beings, or great compassion observing mere sentient beings. If you have an understanding, a realization of impermanence when you're observing the sentient beings, you can develop a deeper kind of compassion. As Summer was saying, you have some kind of understanding of their misapprehensions, and you can feel more compassion for them. You want them to be free from that if you have the affection for them, right? And if you have an understanding, a realization of emptiness, as you observe the sentient beings, at that point, that doesn't mean that at the same moment you're realizing emptiness, but your mind is affected or held by the realization of emptiness. In the same way, say for instance, if you get angry at your neighbor, you're really angry at them. Later, you think, your mind calms down, but the next time you see that neighbor, it's affected by your previous anger. Kind of, a little bit wary, or you don't want to engage them in the same way that you would when you were not angry with them. Affected by doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the realization of emptiness, but that it is affecting your mind as you see the sentient beings who are oblivious of the fact that they are empty of inherent existence. They are oblivious of the fact, they're unknowing of the fact that all of the appearances that seem so real and dramatic to them are just appearances, are actually empty of the existence they're attributing to them. You have a much greater feeling of empathy for their plight. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense?
So,
yeah,
please. Yeah. So the first third type of compassion would be something like a compassion which is almost always exchanging self from and others. Or
say again, exchanging others, did you say?
Yeah, with this third type of compassion, you would be kind of always exchanging self and others, doing this method, because yourself and others are selfless, or?
Oh, no, not in that sense. In fact, even the compassion observing mere sentient beings, to have that kind of compassion, you need to have, an affection for them, either through the 7 points of cause and effect or through equalizing and exchanging self and others. But that third kind of compassion is one in which your compassion is even greater, because you realize not only are they suffering, you're realizing that they are suffering because of their belief in inherent existence. They believe what's appearing to them. It's like when you go to the movies and you see the hero who you've become invested in. I was just rewatching some of the old episodes of Game of Thrones, because the prequel is going to be starting, right? Some of you may know. And you get invested in that little guy who's a great actor, very, very erudite person, who is sort of like, you feel, you feel affection for him, right? And you feel affection because of their misconceptions also. So the great compassion that observes the non-observable, or the non-referential compassion, is one that is held by a realization of emptiness, that is affected by your realization of emptiness. And so you have a deeper compassion for sentient beings because you recognize that they are laboring under this misconception. Diana, you have your hand up.
Thank you. We've kind of bumped up against the point of how does working with these understandings oneself translate to when we're speaking to other people who perceive themselves as suffering because of something transitory. First, I'm remembering His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying that there were essentially two different sets of directions, which is that when I regard your suffering, it should just be intolerable to me, and I should want to do everything I can for you not to suffer. When I'm regarding my own suffering, the only useful thing is to see the ways in which I have caused it, the ways that I have caused my own life to be difficult, and to have a deeper understanding and commitment to not doing those things. And in the way that so as a psychologist, I've worked with a lot of people where I was working with like one part of my mind as a Dharma practitioner and the other in thinking about what I know about human beings and motivation and change. And I think you have to start with acknowledging your respect for their suffering. If somebody comes up to me and says, okay, so I have a chronic illness, and I cannot tell you how many people say, despite the fact that it's genetic, all you have to do is eat lots of meat, or never eat meat, or one wonderful teacher that I cannot go to anymore because she keeps insisting that all I have to do is drink urine and I'll be fine. You need to go to where that person is first and engage with them in a way that respects their perception of what's going on with them. And then sometimes you can very incrementally and slowly bring it back to another place that might give them some more illumination or something like that.
That's skillful means, right? Yeah. So even the bodhisattva who realizes that the sufferings, with the compassion, non-referential compassion, realizes that the suffering that sentient beings are experiencing doesn't really exist the way that it appears, the person still has compassion for them because that person is under the belief that they are suffering, There's a debate that comes in the Indian texts, that talks about if all of the sentient beings' sufferings are mere illusory, they're actually empty of the import that sentient beings attribute to them, what's the sense of having compassion for them? Well, the answer is because they believe it. They don't have that realization. They believe that. And you have to, as you say, you have to address them, first of all, from their point of view, and slowly lead them. Right now, we're not in a position like a Buddha to know all of the, to know what exactly is in their mind, to know the exact methods to lead them. So this leads the person who is experiencing this kind of compassion to strive to develop, to develop bodhicitta to strive to become a Buddha, from which stance we would be like the perfect therapist, we'd be the perfect doctor, we'd be the perfect friend, because we know exactly what to do, how to act, we would know what's on their mind, where to lead them. How are we doing? We okay? Let me go a little bit further. In the commentary, the word transmigrating being or migrator is dropped, and it reads, "I bow to that compassion which." This is done because it is understood that migrators are implicit in the context of the two later objects. So this is a comment for someone who's following Chandrakirti's text, how the root verses are written, and so forth. It should be almost, how to say, if you look at the words and you might wonder how the verse makes sense. Is this just saying that you have to add some extra words into here? Now, in an utterly clear pool of water, shimmering with ripples caused by a breeze, reflections of the moon appear. And as one sees the rise and fall of these reflections, together with its basis, Jeffrey Hopkins says, the water that serves as the basic object is actually apprehended prior to the reflection, but the reflection is manifestly apprehended as a real moon that disappears occasionally. Let me get back here. So in the analogy that Chandrakirti is giving, talking about seeing the reflection of the moon in rippling water, it's talking about these two final kinds, two latter types of compassion. The rippling water, the movement and so forth is indicating the impermanence. And the way that you apprehend a moon in water, ideally, is that you don't believe like a deer sees the moon in the water and might think that's the actual moon, or someone uneducated. You realize that it's a mere appearance, and you don't grasp at it as being real. That's talking about the third kind of compassion. So that analogy here says, now in an utterly clear pool of shimmering, in an utterly clear pool, shimmering with ripples caused by a breeze. This is kind of talking about the compassion that understands impermanence. One sees the rise and fall of these reflections together with the basis, the water, as if seeing the moon itself in the water. Wise ones, that is, those who are versed in understanding this nature, will perceive on a moment-by-moment basis when we say moment-by-moment basis, that means impermanence. Things are changing moment by moment, right? One will perceive these reflections to be transient and devoid of the reality of being the moon that they appear to be. That's talking about the two final kinds of compassion. So you will perceive these reflections to be transient. That means the understanding of impermanence, and devoid of the reality of the moon that they appear to be. The doe or the deer that looks in the pond, or that's an example that comes in my mind. I'm not sure where it comes from. Believing that that's a real moon, or like the parakeet who looks in the mirror and seemingly thinks there's another parakeet there. I don't know what parakeets actually think. Is that true? Does anyone know? Do they think there's a real parakeet there?
It's certainly true with my dog.
I was going to say just that. One of our dogs does that.
When you have a mirror that they can look into? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, you can feel some kind of compassion for them because you know the actual situation. So this is talking about, say, that is the wise ones. That is those who are versed in the understanding of this nature. So one who's versed in understanding impermanence and versed in understanding emptiness will perceive on a momentary basis those reflections to be transient and devoid of the reality of being the moon that they appear to be. So it appears like the moon, but you know it is not the moon. Just talking about these two kinds of compassion. Those two kinds of compassion don't occur in ordinary beings at the same time. You'll have, if your mind is affected by recently realizing impermanence, when you observe sentient beings, in your mind, they're sort of qualified by being impermanent. When you've recently realized emptiness and you observe sentient beings, your mind will be affected by that realization of emptiness, and they will appear kind of like what's it called? Mirage-like, you know, sort of like not existing in the way that they appear. Just like this example, bodhisattvas under the power of compassion, when they see other sentient beings who reside in the ocean of the identity view. What does that mean? Nadine, do you know what that means? In the ocean of the identity view?
It refers to the view of the transitory collection, probably.
Yeah, so that's just how Thupten Jinpa translates it where is it? Beings are in the identity view, yeah. So Hopkins just calls it the view of the transitory collection. The auto commentary by Chandrakirti says, the cause of the eminent taste of the nectar of the Dharma of ignorance, the characteristic of all erroneous conceptions, the extensive blue water of the ignorance of the entirety of migrators, strongly agitated by the wind of impermanence. So what Lama Tsongkhapa here is doing is just quoting part of what Chandrakirti says in his auto commentary. So he's making an analogy, right? Beings who reside in the misconception that they have an inherently existent self. They exist in this misconception of the view of the transitory collection. You know what that means, right? The view of the transitory collection. Ron, do you know what the view of the transitory collection is? No. Weren't you in some of our previous classes? No, okay. Okay, that's okay. View of the transitory collection, when we talk about the different kinds of delusions or afflictions that we have, we talk about the 6 root delusions, right? Ida, do you know the 6 root delusions? I think we talked recently, right? You have to unmute.
My space bar doesn't work that way. Ignorance, attachment, anger. I forgot the others.
Well, those are a good start. Afflicted doubt, or you say pride, afflicted doubt. Those
wrong
are 5,
views.
and then wrong views. And those wrong views are of 5 types. So you could say there are 10 delusions altogether. There are 5 non-views that are afflictions, and there are 5 views that are afflictions. The first of those views is the view of the transitory collection. It's a kind of ignorance that views the conventionally existent self, and because it appears that conventionally existent self appears superimposed as an inherently existent self, one cannot separate the two. One grasps to the conventional self as being inherently existent. That's called the view of the transitory collection. You haven't heard that before, Ron? Oh, okay, good. No, that's good. Something new. So, in a sense, all of the delusions come out of this view of the transitory collection, grasping to the self. And so it's like an ocean from which different streams come out, right? So he's saying beings who reside in the ocean of the view of the transitory collection, the ocean of identity view, an ocean into which flow the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. What is that? This kind of analogy. So the view of the transitory collection is grasping at oneself as inherently existent. What replenishes that view? The view of the ignorance that grasps other things other than the self as inherently existence. That's what he's calling ignorance here. An ocean into which flow the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. Keep on losing my place here. Yeah. So he's saying that this ocean, this analogy is the view of the transitory collection, or the identity view, that's believing in an inherently existent self, and it is being replenished or revivified by believing in the existence of external phenomena, the existence of my arm, my feelings. My feelings, that's what we generally take as being very important. Feelings themselves are empty of inherent existence, but that the belief in them as being inherently existent revivifies our sense of self-identity. So he says, beings who reside in the ocean of identity view, an ocean into which flow the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. An ocean, it's a view of the transitory collection, that is being beaten up by the storms of false mental projections. Jeffrey says, they see this ocean in which sentient beings abide is stirred by the winds of improper thought, or what in previous courses I refer to as inappropriate attention. You view things in an inappropriate way. You think that they are they're truly existent. You think that they are, something is really happiness, something is really suffering, and so forth. It's called inappropriate attention. Appropriate attention, when we talk about the cause of the delusions, basically, if you have the seed of the delusion, that's one of the causes, the object of your delusion. If you won't have attachment if you don't have the seed of attachment in your mind. All of us have the seeds of all of the delusions now. But in addition to the seed, you need to have an object, like say something that's attractive. So the seed then can sprout. You see something that is attractive and your attachment can rise. One of the other further causes of the delusions is what's called inappropriate attention. Thinking about, that's nice. That's really nice. If I had that, I'd really be happy. Thinking in inappropriate ways like that, that exacerbates the situation. So let's try to read this again. Just like this example, bodhisattvas under the power of compassion, when they see other sentient beings, who reside in the ocean of the identity view. That means they're under the influence of the view of the transitory collection, that kind of ignorance. An ocean into which flows the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. What revivifies that view of the transitory collection is general ignorance that views other phenomena as inherently existent. An ocean that is being beaten up by the storms of false mental projections. So it is, caused to be agitated by our inappropriate attention to things. When they see such beings before them, these bodhisattvas, when they see these beings before them, beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma. Hopkins has a better translation of that line, and he says, and that the reflections of the being's own wholesome and unwholesome actions, which are like the moon in the sky, are reflected in front of them. And upon whom befalls the suffering of conditioned existence, of moment by moment disintegration, and see these beings as devoid of intrinsic existence, great compassion arises in the bodhisattvas. As explained above, this also arises on the basis of a sense of endearment toward other sentient beings, and from contemplating the plight of wandering in the cycle of existence, wandering in samsara. Although the identity view, or the view of the transitory collection, is a form of ignorance, ignorance here is mentioned separately in Chandrakirti's commentary, and it refers to the ignorance of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena. That's just what we were saying a moment ago. Believing in the inherent existence of external things other than the self. Generally, when we talk about selflessness, there are two kinds, right? Selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. Tender and Venerable, is a person not a phenomena? You have to unmute. Or you thought just by nodding your head, I don't understand. Can you unmute? Isn't it too far away?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Venerable Tendrin.
Yes.
So
a person is phenomena. So it's just referring to phenomena other than persons.
Right. So when we talk about selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena, although a person is a phenomena or phenomenon, when you talk about that distinction, you separate the two. Phenomena, in that case, selflessness of phenomena means selflessness of all phenomena other than persons. Okay, so here it says, although the identity view is a form of ignorance, ignorance is mentioned separately in the commentary, Chandrakirti's commentary, and it refers to the ignorance of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena other than the person, which induces or strengthens the identity view. That's where the analogy of talking about the blue, the water coming into the ocean, an ocean into which flow the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. So that's sort of Chandrakirti's poetic way of saying that the ignorance of the grasping at the inherent existence of phenomena replenishes or intensifies the view of the transitory collection. How are we doing? Making sense? Completely lost? Oh, Mikhail, you have a question or comment?
Yeah. When I'm grasping at, can I grasp at the self of someone else? as being
Okay,
true.
good.
Yeah.
Right.
But
So
where
is
is
that-
it?
Go on.
Where is it included here? I don't.
So there, when we talk about selflessness, selflessness, we have two kinds: selflessness of persons, selflessness of phenomena. Within selflessness of persons, there's also division. Grasping at the self of oneself is called the view of the transitory collection.
Yeah.
Grasping at the self of some other person, for you to grasp at me as being inherently existent, that is an example of grasping to the self of persons, but it is not an example in your own continuum of grasping at your own self. So there's two kinds of selflessness of persons: the selflessness of persons, someone other than you, and the selflessness of your own self, which would be the antidote to the view of the transitory collection, right? Make sense?
So I don't see it here. The grasping to the self of other persons.
Right. Well,
I don't see it included here.
Yeah. So he's talking about, there's some kind of connection there when he's talking about beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Reflections of beings' own wholesome and unwholesome actions, which are like the moon in the sky reflected in front of them. So when you look at when you're looking at the sentient beings and you're developing compassion for them, you are, if your mind is held by realization of the emptiness of persons other than yourself, you recognize their plight, because what is appearing to them is, is actually the appearance. We'll say the appearance to a sentient being. What we experience is the ripening effect of our past karma. Right, all the world that we see. Other sentient beings, how we see them is a result of our own karma. So we don't recognize that. We take those appearances to be real and we grasp at them, whereas they are actually empty of that appearance. They're just the mere appearance of the ripening of our karma. So when he's talking about here, beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma. Even that, Thupten Jinpa's translation, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. You have to think about the analogy for some time. How are we doing? Let me just go a little bit further. And upon which befalls the suffering of conditioned existence of moment by moment disintegration, and see these beings as devoid of intrinsic existence, great compassion for them arises in the bodhisattvas. As explained above, this also arises on the basis of a sense of endearment towards other sentient beings and from contemplating their plight of wandering in samsara, the cycle of existence. Although the identity view of the transitory collection is a form of ignorance, ignorance is mentioned here separately in the commentary and refers to the ignorance of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena, which induces the identity view. So who are these things happening? If you yourself have realized emptiness, it includes emptiness of phenomena, the emptiness of persons, the emptiness of your own self. So you're seeing sentient beings as under the influence of their own view of the transitory collection. They're believing their self to be inherently existent, which makes all of the other delusions vivified. So it brings about all of the other delusions. You realize that ignorance is causing them suffering, and that all of the appearances of their environment and of other persons is just the reflection of their own karma. So there are three kinds of things that are going on there. You're talking about, the view of the transitory collection, which is a kind of grasping, is a bad thing, right? The grasping at self of other persons that person interacts with. You're having compassion with for someone. They believe other people that interact with them are inherently existent. That's an example of their grasping at a self of persons. And they believe that their own feelings, their own discriminations, their own body, and other phenomena are inherently existent. That's the basic kind of ignorance that's grasping to the self of phenomena.
I think it's the very last sentence you read, which I don't understand. He's mentioning three things: the identity view, transitory collection, and then ignorance, and then the inappropriate attention. And he's saying that ignorance refers to the self of phenomena.
Ignorance is a grasping to the self of phenomena, right?
Yeah, but here he's leaving out the ignorance of, the
grasping to the self of persons other than oneself.
Yeah, of other persons.
Yeah. So that comes, I mentioned just a moment ago, where does it say? Beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma.
Yeah, that's clear here. Yeah,
When they
thank you.
see such beings before them, beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma, that's talking about the grasping to the self of persons other than oneself. Okay.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Let me see. How are you doing? Oh, Jennifer, you have a question.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first is just to clarify regarding the 6 root delusions. Is ignorance the grasping to the self of phenomena, but the afflicted view, the first category of that is the afflicted view of the transitory aggregates? Is that correct or incorrect?
Say again.
Sorry. What is the definition of ignorance? The first of the 6.
Of the 6 delusions, right? That is grasping to phenomena as being inherently existent. So technically speaking, the view of the transitory collection is a kind of ignorance because it's grasping at a particular phenomena, one's own personal identity, one's own self, as being inherently existent. But it's separated, when you talk about the 6 delusions, it's separated generally when we talk about the selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of persons. This is the argument we were talking about before. Persons are phenomena, but when you talk about selflessness of persons and phenomena, they're meant to be different. When you say the selflessness of phenomena, generally you mean phenomena other than the person. But technically speaking, persons are phenomena. So you could say that ignorance includes the view of the transitory collection.
Thank you. And then the second question, I don't know if it's appropriate or we have time for this, but it's just come up in the practice of Tantra when we practice pure view.
Right.
Could you share how that relates to emptiness and seeing oneself and others?
Okay, pure view is a little bit different than emptiness. So generally, when we talk about Tantra, from the tantric point of view, the root of cyclic existence is not ignorance or the view of the transitory collection. From the point of view of, let's say, generation stage of Tantra, the root of samsara is ordinary view. That means thinking, I am ordinary George. I am ordinary Jennifer. I'm just, I'm just miserable, or, or maybe, even thinking with pride, I'm better than others. That's still ordinary view. Divine view or pure view is having recognized that through understanding emptiness, like say when you practice a tantric sadhana, you dissolve all of the appearances into emptiness, right? You go through the various stages of the death evolution, and the clear light view of death, realizing emptiness. From that, one re-emerges in the form of a divinity, let's say Vajrayogini or Tara or Manjushri or Yamataka or whatever. That view, so you think at that point, the person I had thought I was, Jennifer, doesn't exist at all the way that I had been conceiving myself as. Whereas I can recognize this appearance of myself as Vajrayogini as qualified by being empty of inherent existence. It comes out of emptiness. So that is called divine view or pure view. It is related with emptiness, but the pure view is not necessarily one which is recognizing oneself as empty of inherent existence, although it can be the pure view can be increased by that realization. Pure view just means giving up the ordinary view. We say tamel. Tamel means ordinary, the view of ordinariness. So the view of ordinariness is just thinking that, I am limited and so forth. In a sense, we are limited, but from the point of view of Tantra, we talk about Tantra as being the effect vehicle. Have you heard that experience, or the resultant vehicle? We say the causal vehicle is the bodhisattva path. The resultant vehicle is the Tantrayana. So that means you take the resultant, your ultimate result of being an enlightened being into the present, and you try to actualize that, identifying yourself with your eventual achievement and enlightenment in the form of, Tara, Chenrezi, Vajrayogini, whatever. And you think, this is me. Just labeled me, just the conventionally existent me. That is more correctly you than the ordinary view of yourself as being, inherently existent, which is completely wrong, right? So the Tantra, when we talk about the cause of cyclic existence in Tantra, we talk about the root cause is ordinary view. The antidote to ordinary view is divine view, viewing oneself as an enlightened being, as one will be, and one's environment as the mandala of the, of your deity. Your house is the celestial mansion and so forth, and all of the other beings are the divine beings of the mandala, the dakas and dakinis and so forth. It's a very vast subject, and I can't do justice to it right now. Not that I could anyway, but even given more time. But maybe let's leave it at that right now.
Thank you so much.
Richard, do you have a question? Comment?
Yes, thank you, Venerable George. I have been trying to understand exactly what's meant by the view of the transitory collection since I first heard the term a couple of years ago, and I'm still struggling. And I wrote down what I think is a definition based on what you said, and I was wondering if you could just critique it. I said, the view of the transitory collection is the view that the conventionally existent self is superimposed over the appearance of the inherently existent self and can't be separated from it. It is a kind of ignorance. Is that accurate?
You don't have to use all those words. The view of the transitory collection is a view which observes the conventionally existent I and holds it, grasps it as being inherently existent. Extra words that you added can explain that. So the extra words you added being superimposed. So you observe the conventionally existent Richard, but in so doing, the moment that you have a understanding of the conventional existent self, immediately it is superimposed with the appearance of an inherently existent self. And therefore, the mind that grasps at that conventionally existent self as being inherently existent is based upon the fact that it appears to be inherently existent. Right? But the actual definition of the view of the transitory view of the collection, it just says the view that grasps at the conventionally existent person as being inherently existent. If you ask, why does it believe that? Because it appears that way. It's not as though we cannot view the conventionally existent, our conventionally existent self in an isolated way, just by itself. Only a Buddha who sees the two levels of truth at the same time can see that. So when we view when we refer to or we observe the conventionally existent I, by its very nature, it's mixed with the appearance of an inherently existent I because of beginningless ignorance in our continuum. Things, when you're not in meditative equipoise, when once one has realized emptiness directly, when you arise from that meditation, you're getting out of the meditation, appearances, everything that appears, the world appears, your own sense of self appears, the trees, the house, and so forth all appear, and they appear to be inherently existent. They are not inherently existent. That appearance of inherent existence is a residue of our beginningless ignorance. The way that they do exist, say on the appearances, you can impute, on the appearance of your aggregates, you can impute Richard. But as soon as you impute Richard, it appears that Richard exists from its own side. The two are joined in a way that we can't separate. You can only separate them through analysis when you recognize that the appearance of an inherently existent self doesn't make sense, that such a thing does not exist. Then when you arise from that and you see appearances again, you realize that they are only merely imputed in the phenomena that we see. The tree is imputed upon the appearance of its parts.
Yeah, I think I understood the implications of it. What I didn't understand was the term, and I think you've been very helpful in making that clear.
Okay.
What the actual term refers to, because I just simply the words for me don't mean anything connected to what the definition is. It just seems like a phrase I have to memorize and say, oh, that's what it means.
Okay, that's good.
But thank you. I think I understand it now.
Shankar, you have a thought?
Yes, this is regarding the last bit in that paragraph. Blah, 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 ignorance of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena which induces the identity view. If you could repeat, it's not clear to me what it means when it says which induces the identity view.
So when we talk about these two kinds of ignorance, we talk about the view of the transitory collection and the basic ignorance of the six delusions, right? Basic ignorance grasps all phenomena as being inherently existent. Once you have done, that's part of your repertoire, right? You have a continuation of ignorance since beginningless time. When you have a body and feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, other delusions, and so forth, and your form aggregate, when you have an apprehension of them, with ignorance, they appear to be inherently existent, and that induces the view of the transitory collection, that induces the view that, oh, I exist. Once you have an apprehension of I, let's say you're in the womb or you're just a little baby and it's being revivified again and again, you have a sense that your body truly exists. Your feelings are really important. They truly exist. Your decisions, your discriminations really are important. They really exist. They're true. All of your other mental factors, whether they be benign, virtuous factors or negative mental factors, you believe that they really exist. So you have this sense of I, like in the beginning, Chandrakirti says, first there is a sense of I, then there is a sense of mine. So even before the sense of I comes the conception is the ignorance of inherent existence that's always there. Your aggregates are inherently existent, and once you experience that, you have the sense of I, the view of the transitory collection. All of these subjects will be covered again and again as we go through the text. When we get into the section of the selflessness of persons and so forth, so right now, this may seem a little bit unclear, but it will become clearer as we go along. Okay. So thank you. I've run out of time. You've run out of time. Thanks for your perseverance. Someone I don't remember, Nawang Jimpa. Where's Nawang Jimpa? I can't remember. At the bottom. Nawang, are you there still?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Where are you?
In the Netherlands.
Oh, the Netherlands. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So thanks for being here. We will continue next week. If you get a chance to look at the text that is in the chat, where is it? Objectless compassion. That will give you some more grist for the mill in talking about this third kind of compassion, how it's, in fact, the discussion of that will be coming up. So that would be a good primer for next time. So Snehi, would you like to put up the communication first?
Yes, and since it's just been a few weeks, I just want to remind everyone we have a discussion group. If people wish to stay after Venerable George leaves, I think normally we just take a 10-minute break and then have a discussion group.
Excellent. So would you like to put up the prayers? Do you have the dedication prayers? There you go. So I will recite them this time, okay, Snehi? Due to these virtues, this is Gewa D, here it says due to the merits of these virtuous actions, actually, due to these virtues, May I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, or precious bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Notice this is actually a prayer. It's not a dedication, but one can understand by implication, due to these merits, may the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And long life prayer of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the Muni's moral code, serving as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, masterfully accomplishing the magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. And you are eyes, you are an eye to view all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateway for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by love, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you next week. Take a look at the text, read ahead, and we'll continue.